This is a video showing how I added a Irwin 6.5-inch woodworking vise and a 5.5-inch Craftsman metalworking vise to my Workmate 400. I really like the Workmate 400. It's a very useful piece of kit to have, and now it's even more useful. So let's get started. Hello and welcome. I'm John and welcome to Bright Spark Ideas. So today I just wanted to make a quick video about my Workmate 400. My workshop is really cramped. I don't have the space I'd like to use. I see these videos on YouTube where these guys have their whole garage spread out and they have these big areas to work in. I tend to be working outside a lot because I don't have the space, and this Workmate 400 is rather handy. But in this next video I would like to give you some idea of the things that I'm going to do to mine to make it a little bit more useful. So hopefully this will be helpful. One of the things that I wanted to do to the Workmate was add a vise. I have had a clamp-on vise that I used to clamp on here, which was kind of handy, but certainly wasn't a real solid fixture. So from Amazon I picked up this Irwin 6.5-inch record vise, and it's a pretty basic vise. It doesn't have any extra features where you can add a stop and things like that, but for $21 I thought it was a good purchase. So I'm just going to show you how I attach this to here, or I'm going to attach it to here. I started and unfortunately I seem to have lost the video of drilling out these holes here, but I'll show you what I did and hopefully you'll get the idea. Somehow I've managed to lose the video that I made of marking this area out and drilling these holes. Obviously I can't remake it, so what I'm going to do is show you how I set up to do that, and hopefully you'll get the idea from that. So let me reposition this and show you what I did. So let me show you how I started. To actually attach the vise, I'm using a couple of lag screws, and these are, let's see, 1.5-inch lag screws. A couple of long screws here that are, these ones are 3 inches. Don't know that you need them that long. And what I did was I went to Home Depot, I bought a piece of 2x8, and it actually ends up being just under 7.5 by, what's that, 1.5. It was really cheap. I think I paid less than $10 for an 8-foot length, and I've cut it up into 3 sections, and I'll show you what I did with this first one. So this I cut to 23.25 because it's going to fit underneath here. And let me show you how I'm going to fix the vise, and then how I'm going to attach this to the top plate of the Workmate. I've already greased the working parts of this vise, so now I'm getting grease all over my hands, but the intent is that this piece here is going to fit here like this. These 2 screws are going to hold it in place, and then the lag bolts are going to come down in through here. And so let's go ahead and put that together. I pre-drilled the holes obviously to make it simple, and we'll put that together and then move on to the next stage. So I'm just going to drive these screws down Okay, that is going to be pretty solid. So, to fix the vise to the top piece of the Workmate, I had pre-drilled holes and used a fastener bit to make a hole big enough to take the head of the bolt and a washer to go down through here. Now, I seem to have lost that video, but if I find it, I'll add it back in. But basically, it was pretty simple to just mark out these holes and so that I could add this. The next stage was to drill out corresponding holes into the base piece, and all I did was I clamped it underneath here with a couple of clamps and drilled down through. All I did next was add these little I think they call them furniture fitting. They basically take the 3/8 bolt that's going into here and just wrench it down with the wrench, with the hex wrench, until they're flush. And what we're going to do next is clamp this back underneath and put these bolts down through again. Okay, so having clamped this back underneath here again, I can now make sure that I've lined up my bolts correctly. And I'm just going to go around and I'll put the rest of these bolts in and we'll pull it all up tight. I used 6 fixing points here. That's because I'm a little anal, might not need that many. That really depends on your preference. I'm using 2-inch bolts, and this is a 9/16 socket I'm using with the washers here. Now, the reason I decided to countersink these was because I wanted a nice flush surface. I like to continue to have this workbench flush. I'm going to show you some other pieces that I'm going to put into here that I'm going to add another vise on and use for different things. So that's why I wanted to keep this flush. So let's go ahead and get these wound down. When you're using a fastener bit to put these in, make sure that they are going to be big enough for also for the socket. I've already seen that this one, because it's not perfectly aligned, is going to be a trouble for me to get down in there. So just make sure, perhaps maybe using a slightly bigger fastener bit would have made it easier for me. I kept it the same size actually as the dog holes, but let me make sure I can get those down and we can move ahead. I'm not sure if I mentioned that I had used my fastener bit to drill right down through here so that I could still use the dogs wherever necessary. I ended up removing the clamps so that I could move this a little bit, so I could realign all of the screws, or get them in alignment so that I could then fully put them down. So now they're all nicely snugged down, and this is absolutely solid as a rock. I'll put the vise together and show you how that looks. As I said, this is a fairly inexpensive vise, and what you'll actually this particular one has got a much larger gap at the bottom and then it does it. It's nice and tight at the top here, but there's a gap at the bottom. What I did was I picked up from Home Depot when I was there some nice red oak that I'll make a couple of fascia pieces inside here. They can be attached The front one can be attached via a couple of screws here. And then you noticed I used very long screws to attach this. I can actually, I don't know if you can see here, but these two screws, I can use these screws, take them out and attach the back piece of wood in here. The other advantage of using that is I can make the vise a little bit wider, and I can also flush it up with the very top of here. But for now, I just wanted to show you how I put this on, and I want to head to the next project, which is adding a engineer's vise, and I'm going to use a spot in the middle using another piece of 2x8. Now, the next project I had was to actually add a center panel where my metalworking vise is going to sit here. All I did was basically set the vise on top, and I just went round and traced the shape of the base and marked the holes, drilled the holes, and once again I used those inserts for the screws, the bolts to go down through there, because I'm probably going to keep the vise bolted onto this panel, and then I can just remove it whenever I want. Now, to add this on here, what I've done is I've added some bolts here, and basically what happens is these bolts screw down in here, and they connect with these points underneath. If you remember with this piece here, on the bottom here we have these pieces here. Well, of course, this piece of wood is much thicker, so we can't buy more of these and just use these. So instead of using these, I'm going to use these bolts that go down into the same slots, and I'll show you how that works. I've taken them out because I've found that when I put this piece in here, I'm trying to show you all this, it's below this level. It's not flush. It's not a full 2 inches. It doesn't fit in here. So here's what I did. Got another piece here, and just to see if it works or not, I've cut a couple of pieces of scrap wood that I had. This is just a 1/4 inch melamine faced wood. It's not ply, I don't know what you call this. It's like a hardboard is what I call it in England. But anyway, putting that on there pretty much flushes this up on this surface, as you can see. So what I'm going to do is cut some more of that pieces of paneling, put it on here, and then put these screws back in here, and I'll show you how I did that. I mean, this was just pretty much straightforward. I just cut these and clamped them on here while the glue set. We can go through that and do that, and then I put the screws in, and you can see how this is going to fit in here. But the point being is then I can remove this panel very easily. I'm probably going to use this one purely to sit in here when I'm not using that engineering vise, and just clamp this up because it's going to give me a nice flat surface. But let me show you how I'm going to do this, and we'll take it to the next stage. So it's time to mark where these are going to go. Now I put a couple of lines here on each side so that I know where the center of these holes are, because I want to use the same holes that I did before, but I'm now going to cover them up with this, so I'm going to need to locate them. I'm going to just mark on here the edge, or where that's going to go, and okay, So this is going to be where this is going to be positioned. That'll be centered over those holes, and I'm marking a couple of lines here because once I put the glue on, I want to know exactly where they fit. Alright, so what I'm going to do is add some glue on here now. It's going to do the same with the other side and clamp it down. And to make it easier to clamp, I'm going to just put a couple of offcuts under here so I can raise it up enough to get the clamps on. And we'll just put a very generous amount. I don't mind using lots of wood glue. You can always clean it up afterwards. So I'm going to go ahead and do this and probably speed through it and clamp it. It's beginning to get a little late here, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to finish cleaning this up a little bit, and then I will let this basically dry overnight now based on the time, and then tomorrow I will give you a view of what we're going to do next to position the bolts and basically put the vise on. Oh, see you tomorrow. Now, because I already drilled holes in here for the bolts before I put these spacer pieces on, I'm going to have to locate where these are and re-drill them. However, if you're doing this from scratch, you don't have to do that. All you basically have to do is locate these areas here, and this is where you're going to have the bolt end up, in this position and this position. So it's pretty simple to put this on here and come underneath with a pen and mark these areas here. But before you do that, you want to clamp this up to make sure it's in the right position. Right, the point I was making was that you really want to make sure that this piece is really pushed back as far as it goes, and get this aligned here, and then just crank this down really nice and tight, because this is going to be the position you want it locked in when you're using this engineering vise here, because that's a big piece of weight here. So make sure that this is really in the right position by cranking it down nice and tight. I'll flip this over and we'll mark the spots and drill them out. Now, as I said, I only flip this over so that you can see how easy it is. You just need to mark the area here where you're going to, let's do it with a Sharpie here. Yeah. I'm not so sure I can get in there at that angle with the Sharpie. That wasn't so clever. Okay, so just basically mark this area here, because this is where the bolts are going to sit as you move forward. Do the other side and we'll drill those out and put the bolts in. Okay, so I'm using my old Craftsman vise here. It's a 5.5 inch metalworking vise. Hopefully I can get it round the right way. Alright, I've got my Craftsman vise set up here on the end. I'm going to be using the 3/8/16, but I'm only going to use 1.5 inches on these here. So let's pop these in and get this tightened down. Okay, I think I'm going to clean this up because obviously it needs it. I'm going to pull this out, put some grease on it, make sure it's all working, but I think this is a pretty good, solid for this vise. We've got a woodworking vise at the front, we've got this here, so I think that was a pretty good bright spark idea.